You say you like being alone, but have you ever asked yourself why silence feels safer than people? There is a moment, quiet, heavy, almost invisible, when solitude stops being a preference and starts becoming a shield. Most people never notice when it happens. They think it's a personality trait, a quirk, a harmless choice. But you felt it, that subtle shift, that hidden pull, that strange comfort in disappearing from the world. And today, I want to explore that with you, not to judge, but to understand, not to change who you are, but to help you see what lies beneath the version of you that walks alone. Because behind every person who chooses solitude, there is a story, a wound, a silence, a memory they never fully processed, and a question they've avoided asking themselves for years. You may think your isolation is a decision, but what if it's a reaction? What if your loneliness isn't something you chose, but something that chose you? Let's slow down. Let's breathe. Let's peel back the psychological layers of the solitude you call comfort. The quiet you run to you already know this. Solitude can feel like a sanctuary, a place where expectations dissolve, noise disappears, and the world stops demanding more than you can give. For some people, being alone is simply peaceful. But for others, maybe for you, it becomes a survival strategy, a way to control what life refused to let you control in the past. Psychologists call this a withdrawal defense, an invisible emotional reflex created when connection has cost you more than isolation ever will. You might have convinced yourself that being alone is just who you are, that you were built this way, that distance is your natural setting. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself quietly, do I enjoy being alone? Or did I learn to enjoy it because people were once too painful? Let that question sit with you. Don't run from it. Let it knock gently on the door of your mind, because within your honest answer lies a truth that could reshape the entire way you see yourself. When solitude becomes a mirror, there is a darker side to chosen loneliness that many never talk about. It's subtle, hidden, almost elegant. When you isolate, you create a world where you don't risk being misunderstood. You don't risk being abandoned. You don't risk being hurt again. But you also stop risking being seen. You stop risking connection. You stop risking growth. You stop risking life. In solitude, nothing threatens you, but nothing transforms you either. And the most dangerous thing about this psychological refuge is that it begins to feel like identity. You start believing, I'm just like this. I prefer it this way. I don't need anyone. But is that true? Or is that a story you told yourself so you wouldn't have to confront the real story? The one written long before you learned to choose the silence you live in today. Did people teach you to prefer loneliness? Think back. Not with blame. Not with anger. Just with honesty. When did you first realize that being alone felt safer than being with others? Was it the moment someone dismissed your feelings? Was it when you trusted the wrong person? When you gave too much and received too little? When you spoke and no one listened? Or when you were surrounded by people but still felt unseen? The human mind adapts. It protects. It learns patterns, creates shields, builds emotional armor. And solitude, chosen solitude, is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-protection. But every shield casts a shadow. And I want you to ask yourself something deep. If no one had ever hurt me, would I still choose this much silence? Let the truth rise without forcing it. Sometimes the answer doesn't come in words. It comes in the way your chest tightens or the way your thoughts suddenly get louder. The psychology of self-withdrawal. People who choose solitude tend to share certain psychological traits, even when they believe they're completely different from everyone else. You might recognize yourself in some of these patterns. You feel emotionally drained after social interactions, even with people you like. You overthink conversations long after they're over. You avoid situations where you might be misunderstood or judged. You feel safest when no one expects anything from you. You rarely express your deeper feelings unless you're pushed to the edge. You don't trust easily, and you trust even less when something feels too good. You crave connection, but fear the cost of it. You feel more yourself in your own mind than in any relationship. If any of these resonate, you're not broken, you're not strange, you're not cold, you're someone who learned to survive in silence. But survival isn't the same as healing. Solitude can be a sanctuary. but it can also become a prison with the door wide open, a place where you convince yourself you are in control, while secretly running from the things that still control you. And here's the most complex truth. You can love solitude and still be hiding behind it. You can choose silence and still be escaping something. You can enjoy your own company and still be carrying emotional injuries that never healed. The goal isn't to force yourself into connection. The goal is to understand why solitude feels so necessary. Because once you understand the why, you can decide whether being alone is truly your preference or just your protection. The question you've avoided for years. Before I end this first part, I want to leave you with a question most people never dare to ask themselves. If I weren't afraid of being hurt again, would I still be this isolated? Sit with it. Let it echo. Let it unlock something quietly inside you. This is just the beginning. There is a silence inside people who choose solitude that is different from ordinary quiet. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of someone who has learned to hold their breath emotionally. Someone who has mastered the art of not needing, not expecting, not depending. But what most of us don't realize is that this kind of silence has symptoms. It changes the way you speak, the way you trust, the way you walk into a room and subconsciously position yourself closer to the walls than to people. It changes the way you love, too, carefully, cautiously, almost reluctantly, as if affection were a fragile object you are afraid to drop. This silence becomes your language long before you notice it, and I want you to see how deeply this shapes your life. The weight of "I'm fine." People who choose solitude often carry an emotional habit, the habit of minimizing their own pain. Maybe you've said it 1,000 times. "I'm fine. It's nothing. It's better this way. I don't want to bother anyone." But the truth is simpler and much heavier. You learned that expressing your needs rarely led to comfort. You learned that opening up made you vulnerable to disappointment. You learned that when you showed your true feelings, someone either dismissed them, neglected them, or used them against you. And so your mind created a shortcut: silence. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped expecting people to understand. You stopped believing that your emotions deserved space. You learned to compress your pain into invisibility, and the world praised you for it. They said you were independent, strong, low maintenance, unaffected. But none of those words describe what's really happening inside you. Because what you carry is not strength, it's survival conditioning. The loneliness that grows legs. When solitude becomes your default state, it develops a life of its own. It starts following you everywhere, like a shadow that grows darker in rooms full of people. Even when you try to be social, something inside you pulls back. Even when you try to open up, your words get stuck halfway. Even when you want connection, your mind whispers reasons to retreat. You tell yourself, "It won't last. They'll get tired of me. I'll say something wrong. They don't actually care." And suddenly you're back in your safe place. The silence you know, the isolation you trust. This isn't a preference. It's a reflex, a deep psychological reflex that tells you connection is dangerous, and solitude is the only predictable place. A hidden fear most people don't notice. Let me ask you something, not to expose you, but to help you understand yourself. Do you distance yourself from people before they can get close enough to hurt you? Most people who choose solitude do. They sabotage connections before connections can sabotage them. They detach emotionally as soon as they feel seen. They pull back right when someone begins to care. Because to you, vulnerability feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, and solitude feels like stepping back to solid ground. But here's the part many people don't realize. Your distancing behavior isn't rejection. It's fear. Fear of repeating an old wound. Fear of trusting the wrong person again. Fear of being the one who cares more. Fear of losing yourself inside someone else's needs. Your solitude is not coldness. It's self-preservation. The soft ache you never say out loud. Behind the comfort of isolation, there is a quiet ache, a longing you rarely admit. A small, stubborn part of you that wishes connection wasn't so dangerous. You want depth. You want understanding. You want someone who sees through your silence without being alarmed by it, but you don't know how to ask for it, or how to let it in, or how to trust that it will stay. So you convince yourself you don't need it. You say things like, "I prefer being alone. I don't want complicated relationships. People drain me. I'm better off without anyone. And maybe some of that is true, but not all of it. Because if solitude were enough, you wouldn't feel this quiet ache even now as you hear these words. The moment your solitude becomes a wall, there comes a point when solitude stops being a sanctuary and becomes a barrier that protects you, but also isolates you from experiences you secretly wish you had. It's not that you want crowds or chaos or constant interaction. You don't. But what you do want, what your mind doesn't admit easily, is safety within connection. A relationship where you don't have to mask your emotions. A friendship where silence isn't interpreted as disinterest. A bond where your presence is understood without constant performance. You want belonging without exhaustion. But because you've been hurt, you unconsciously deny yourself the chance to experience it. Why you chose solitude in the first place. Behind your loneliness lies a narrative you rarely revisit. Maybe it was a home where emotions weren't safe. Maybe it was a relationship that pulled too much out of you. Maybe it was years of giving more than you received. Maybe it was being the strong one, the quiet one, the reliable one who never asked for help. Or maybe it was something even simpler. You were never taught how to exist without self-defense. And now solitude feels easier than unlearning that. But I want you to ask yourself something deep. Do I want to stay this way? Or have I just been afraid of changing? This question isn't meant to push you. It's meant to awaken you. Because the moment you become aware of your psychological patterns, you reclaim the ability to choose, not out of fear, but out of clarity. What do you think shaped your relationship with solitude the most? You can answer with one word or a full sentence. There's no right or wrong. Sometimes naming your truth is the first step toward understanding it. There is something almost invisible that happens to people who spend too much time in chosen solitude. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't look like suffering. In fact, it often looks like calmness, quietness, emotional independence. But beneath that surface, something begins to shift. Not in your behavior first, but in the way your mind interprets the world. The slow rewiring of your expectations. Over time, long-term solitude changes what you expect from people. It quietly lowers your hopes, your standards, your willingness to try. You stop expecting to be understood. You stop expecting depth. You stop expecting loyalty. You stop expecting presence. You become emotionally minimalist, not because you don't feel deeply, but because you learn that deep feelings come with deep risks. So your brain rewires itself to protect you. You anticipate disappointment before connection. You assume distance even when someone leans closer. You expect endings more than you trust beginnings. You feel safer imagining scenarios alone than experiencing them with others. It's not pessimism, it's preparation. Your solitude trains your mind to brace for impact, even when there is no threat. The identity that forms in silence. The longer you live inside your solitude, the more your identity adapts to it. You begin to see yourself in a certain way. The quiet one, the independent one, the distant one, the observer, the one who doesn't need anyone, the one who stays in control by staying alone. But identity formed in isolation is tricky. It feels like the real you, even when it's actually the protected you. And the protected you is not the whole you. There is a part of you that wants to be known. A part of you that longs to be understood. A part of you that wants a connection that doesn't drain you or overwhelm you. But that part gets buried beneath layers of self-preservation. Not because you're cold, but because you're scared of losing the small emotional stability you've built. Emotional self-regulation or emotional numbing. Many people who choose solitude believe they are excellent at regulating their emotions. They appear calm. They don't explode. They control themselves well. They keep things inside without breaking. But what looks like emotional regulation is often emotional numbing. You didn't learn how to soothe your emotions. You learned how to silence them. There's a difference. True emotional regulation brings peace. Emotional numbing brings quiet. But it also brings emptiness. And emptiness is a subtle ache. An ache that grows each time you swallow your feelings instead of expressing them. The price of never being too much. People who choose solitude often have one major fear: being a burden, being too much, too emotional, too intense, too complicated, too fragile, too honest. So you shrink your presence to avoid disappointing anyone. You make yourself easy, even when it costs you your authenticity. You apologize for needs you never expressed. You hide sadness behind logical explanations. You pretend you're unaffected when something hurts. You carry the weight alone because asking for help feels dangerous. This is one of the saddest consequences of chosen loneliness. You don't allow anyone the chance to care about you, not because you don't deserve it, but because you fear the disappointment that might come with it. When silence becomes a habit, you can't break. You may not realize it, but silence has become your default response. When something hurts you, you go quiet. When something scares you, you retreat. When something matters to you deeply, you hide it. When someone gets close, you disappear for a while. This isn't intentional, it's instinctive. It's your mind saying, protect yourself. Don't open that door. Don't repeat old pain. Don't trust this too quickly. Solitude has taught you to self-abandon before others can abandon you. And that is the psychological core of your loneliness. You retreat first. You collapse inward before anyone can push you outward. You disappear so no one has the power to take you away. The fear of being seen too clearly. There is something many people misunderstand about those who choose solitude. You don't fear people. You fear exposure. You fear someone seeing the parts of you you've kept hidden for years. Your sensitivity, your insecurity, your unmet needs, your emotional hunger, your vulnerability. You fear being seen so deeply that you lose control over the narrative you built about yourself. Because solitude gives you control, connection requires surrender. And surrender, for someone who's been hurt, feels like standing in front of the world without armor. The desire you don't admit. Out loud, there is a truth, soft, quiet, nearly invisible, that lives inside people who choose solitude. You want connection, but you want a connection that doesn't threaten your emotional safety, a connection that respects your quiet, a connection that doesn't demand constant availability, a connection that isn't loud, chaotic, draining, or overwhelming, a connection where your silence isn't misinterpreted as disinterest, a connection where you don't have to mask your internal storms. You don't want many people. You want the right people. But the fear of disappointment keeps you from letting anyone try. The subtle loneliness behind your independence. You may not look lonely. You may not act lonely. You may not even feel lonely every day. But independence can become a comfortable illusion, a way of believing you need nothing, so you don't have to confront the things you actually long for. Your self-sufficiency becomes a fortress, and inside that fortress, no one can hurt you, but no one can reach you either. This is the cost you pay for the solitude you choose. You protect yourself from pain, but you also protect yourself from connection, understanding, emotional intimacy, and the possibility of being loved in the quiet way you always needed. The choice you must eventually make before we enter the final part. I want to leave you with a question. One that opens a psychological door most people avoid. Is my solitude helping me grow, or is it only helping me survive? If your solitude helps you heal, reflect, recharge, that is healthy. But if your solitude hides your wounds, numbs your feelings, or protects your fear, then it is not a sanctuary. It is a shelter built on old pain. And shelters can be rebuilt. They can be redesigned. They can be softened into homes. You don't need to abandon your solitude, but you do deserve a version of it that doesn't imprison the parts of you that still want connection. There is a moment, quiet, subtle, nearly undetectable, when your solitude stops being a choice and becomes a habit, not a preference, not a lifestyle, but a default psychological state. This is the moment when isolation begins to shape your identity more than your experiences do. And this is where the darker side of chosen loneliness reveals itself most clearly. When solitude starts to rewrite who you are. The human mind is adaptive. If you surround it with silence long enough, it begins to mirror that silence. You speak less. You reveal less. You expect less. You dream less. You risk less. You feel less. You hope less. Not because you don't care, but because caring feels dangerous. Your solitude becomes a cocoon, but also a cage. And what begins as self-preservation slowly turns into self-distortion. You start believing things about yourself that were never true. I'm too complicated. I'm not meant for deep relationships. I don't connect the way others do. I'm better off invisible. I feel things too intensely. No one would understand my mind. But none of these sentences are the truth. They are the echoes of old wounds disguised as personality traits. The loneliness that follows you everywhere. Even when you're physically around people, you feel a subtle distance, as if a thin glass wall separates you from the rest of the world. You watch yourself interacting. You observe rather than participate. You think instead of express. You repress instead of reveal. And the people around you rarely notice, because you've learned to hide your emotional retreat with an unusual skill. You look calm, composed, present, while internally you are miles away. This is the loneliness no one sees. The loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness. The loneliness of the self-contained. The fear beneath your independence. You've become so used to taking care of yourself that the idea of someone caring for you feels almost threatening. You fear expectations. You fear emotional demands. You fear disappointing someone. You fear depending on someone. You fear needing more than someone can give. You fear losing your identity inside someone else's world. So you keep people at a distance, not because you don't want connection, but because you don't trust it. Somewhere along your life, you learned that trusting others is like building a house on unstable ground. It can stand beautifully for a moment, before collapsing without warning, and your solitude became the solid floor beneath your feet. But here is a psychological truth. You need to hear solitude can protect you, but it can also shrink you. And your mind knows the difference. There are days when you feel at peace with your isolation. And there are days, rare, quiet, almost private, when the silence feels heavy, suffocating, hollow. Days when you wish you could open up without fear. Days when you wish someone understood your inner world without needing explanations. Days when your chest aches with the weight of everything you never say. Those days reveal the truth. You don't want to escape people. You want to escape the version of yourself that was hurt by them. What healing actually looks like for someone like you. Healing doesn't mean abandoning your solitude. You don't need crowds. You don't need constant interaction. You don't need noise, chaos, or overstimulation. You need safety. You need emotional clarity. You need connection that feels gentle, respectful, and slow. You need relationships where silence is understood, not questioned. Where presence is enough. Where intensity is not too much. Where depth is welcomed, not avoided. Healing, for you, means adding windows to the walls you built, not tearing them down. It means allowing light in without opening the door to the entire world. It means letting the right people see you, gradually, intentionally, safely. The final question you must face. Before this video ends, I want to leave you with the most important reflection of all. Not a judgment, not a command, just a truth you deserve to confront. Have I been protecting myself? Or hiding from myself? Sit with it. Let it echo. Let it soften you enough to recognize something. You deserve a version of life that doesn't require you to disappear to feel safe. And your solitude, beautiful, deep, introspective, doesn't have to be a prison. It can become a home where connection still has a place. Now, a small request from me to you. If you reached this point of the video, you felt something. Something echoed. Something resonated. Something inside you recognized itself. So I want to know, from which city are you watching this? And if you watched until the final moment, comment the secret word, shadow. It tells me you stayed, you felt, you understood. And one more thing. If this video helped you reflect on yourself, or opened a door inside your mind, or made you see your solitude with new clarity, subscribe to the channel and watch the videos on the final screen. Every story here is for minds like yours. Quiet, deep, observant, introspective. Souls who live between silence and thought. You're not alone in your solitude. Not here.